Hello everyone, I'm Tasty T, and with the Halloween season finally over, I thought it would be an appropriate time to talk about some horror movies. How funny of me. But to be completely honest, I just started getting a bunch of Halloween themed video ideas right at the end of October because my inspiration only strikes at the best possible times. So if you're like me and refuse to let the Halloween spirit die, watch me explain why I think Creep is the perfect horror comedy. For those of you who don't know, Creep is a 2015 found footage horror comedy directed by Patrick Brice, written by and starring both himself and Mark Duplass, and it's pretty great. But before we get more in depth as to why I think that, I'm going to quickly explain what I personally think the purpose of comedy horror is as a genre. Many horror comedies use their comedic elements to satirize and poke fun at the horror genre and aspects commonly found within it, mostly being more funny than they are scary. This is because they usually use horror tropes and techniques to make a joke rather than using them to genuinely scare the audience. An example of this is this scene in Edgar Wright's 2004 film Shaun of the Dead, where the audience is informed of a zombie outbreak through the main character flicking through channels on his TV.
No one official is prepared to comment. Religious groups are calling it Judgment Day. There's panic on the streets of London as an increasing number of reports of serious attacks on people who are literally being eaten alive.
In the film Shaun of the Dead is parodying, this scene would commonly be a serious and dramatic way of showing the audience that a zombie outbreak has occurred, but the film is instead using that trope to reference and make fun of its use in those movies to make a joke out of it. Other horror comedies also use the comedic presentation to reference and make fun of tropes and cliches within the horror genre, with some throwing all seriousness out the window like Taika Waititi's What We Do in the Shadows, while others such as Wes Craven's Scream use horror tropes both unironically and satirically. So where does Creep fit into the purpose of horror comedies? Well, it kind of does and kind of doesn't. Let me explain. Creep is basically about a guy named Aaron who's hired by Joseph, a man who claims that he'll die soon from cancer, to film a video diary for his unborn son that he'll never meet, but has quickly learnt that something's not quite right with Joseph due to him constantly scaring, manipulating, and lying to Aaron. And there's also a cabin. That's basically Creep, and along with being really subversive and entertaining, it manages to use comedy in a really unique way that's different from most other horror comedies. Instead of using comedy to make fun of its horror elements, Creep instead uses its comedic presentation to build upon the film's tone and put you more into the main character's perspective. Because of Mark Duplass's fantastic performance and the editing, a lot of the film's most intense and disturbing moments are instead played out as funny and awkward, yet somehow this presentation seems to work. This is because throughout Creep, Aaron is constantly finding out things about Joseph that are big enough warning signs to get away from him. And while he does eventually leave, Joseph is able to manipulate Aaron into meeting him at a park to talk with him, where he then kills him instead. Aaron knows that Joseph is dangerous, but Joseph is so good at messing with him that he never truly knows how dangerous he actually is until it's too late. This is why the comedic presentation works so well. The film presents these intense and clearly dangerous situations in an awkwardly funny way that clouds our judgment as to how dangerous the situation really is, which perfectly puts us in Aaron's shoes. Both Patrick Brice and Mark Duplass describe Creep as a point of view film, which makes sense not only because it's found footage, but how it uses its comedic presentation to put us in the main character's perspective. As you can tell, I love Creep. The way it uses comedy to build upon its horror feels very different than your average horror comedy, and while I could be reaching, I genuinely think this film has a lot more to it than people give it credit for. So go watch Creep. It's on Netflix and only goes for about 75 minutes, so if you have the time, I highly recommend watching it. This has been Tasty T, and I'll see you in the next video.